Hey there, welcome to my home. Come on in. So I feel like this video has been a long time coming. A number of you have been reaching out to me asking to do a houseplant tour. Today is the day. I'm excited to show you my living room space, the plants that I have growing, how I've set it up, why I've set it up, and how I have learned to make my plants thrive in the indoor jungle that I've created inside my living room. So if you come in to my house, you can see automatically that I have an open concept sort of space. So I've got my living room, my dining area, and then my kitchen. And so the first thing you see when you come in, as you might have noticed, is this large, beautiful, gorgeous plant that I have sitting right in front of a west-facing window. So to orient you, you came in through my east door and you're facing my west-facing window. And that means that this light that comes through this window is really intense in the late afternoon. And that's why I have placed in front of it, not directly in front of it, but near these windows, two plants, this one and this Philodendron melinonii over here, that both really love a lot of light. Now this plant is an Alocasia. Alocasia come in all sorts of sizes and shapes, and I love this particular variety because, you know, you can see how big it gets. It gets pretty tall and the leaves are pretty nice. And I've got 3 different plants inside of this container, and it is just really happy here. Now, because the sun is so intense, the plant is going to want to grow towards this window. So when I water it every week or so, I make sure that I have to turn this plant around so that it stays, you know, lush and doesn't get too close to the window over here. I'm lucky enough to have recessed lighting. Now, from a design perspective, I know you designer friends out there aren't such a big fan of recessed lighting, but as a plant parent, I have to say I've been able to switch out the recessed lighting above this Alocasia and this melinonii over here with grow lights. So on a dark, rainy day like we have in early spring, late winter here in Chicago, where you can see there's not a lot of natural light coming through the window, I have that supplemented with a couple of grow lights so that these plants are still getting the light that they need. And I know that these lights are strong enough because one way that I check to make sure is you can see that I've got a good shadow on this leaf from this light. So you know the intensity of this light, even though it's some distance away, is enough to support the needs of this plant. One thing you may notice now is I've got this huge bank of south-facing windows over there, but we're still pretty deep inside the room. So in the wintertime, this part of the room does get some direct light, but in the summer, it gets almost none at all. So I have this beautiful, gorgeous bird's nest fern. If you look closely, you're going to notice some crispy brown edges on my fern. And yeah, I'm not a perfect plant parent. I've done everything that I can to make sure that this plant is very healthy and happy. But guess what? The holidays happened, I got a little bit busy. This plant dried out a little too often for a little too long. But it's a new year, a new me, and I'm ready to recommit to my plant care habits. And you can see that consequently, since the holidays have passed and I've been watering this plant adequately, you'll notice that these new leaves, there's one here, one here, one here, there's not a trace of brown edges on it. So that's an indication to me that, yeah, if you let your ferns dry out, they're gonna do this to you. If you give them the water that they need, they're going to do this for you. And one of the things that I've done to help me with the watering, as I lift it out of the cachepot, as you can see, I have this double pot system. So I have elected to put this plant in my own homemade self-watering container. That means the soil mass sits in this pot, and then in this bottom pot, it acts as a reservoir where water is just sort of, you know, pooled in here. And then I have these little strings that wick the water up from the bottom of the pot into the soil so that, you know, it does help prevent underwatering in between my weekly check-ins. Now, if I don't refill this container every week, you know, if I get busy around the holidays and I forget about it for 2 or 3 weeks, these brown edges are gonna happen. So that's what happened. Life happens, and you know what? That's okay. I'm totally okay with that because I love this plant nonetheless. I know that in nature, things like this happen. It doesn't rain all the time, and in nature, a bird's nest fern like this is gonna have imperfections. And it doesn't mean I love this plant any less because of it. I have elected to put in this Sansevieria plant here. And, you know, I know that Sansevierias, or snake plants, or mother-in-law's tongue, however you like to talk about them, are known for being tolerant of low light conditions. And that's exactly why I have elected to place it in this location. However, most of my Sansevieria, which I'll show you in just a minute, are growing closer to the window because actually in nature, these plants love really strong bright light and can tolerate drought-like conditions. So I have this one here for now. It seems to be doing well. I thought I would have to move it closer to the window a lot sooner than I have had to, but you can see this is the newest spike and it has just grown really tall and beautiful. I think it's trying to reach the grow light that I also have above both of these plants that are supplementing that outdoor light. We were talking about ferns, so let's talk about this fern right here. I forgot about it that same 3 weeks over the holidays. I went away, I was traveling, I was entertaining, having friends and family over, and my mind was just elsewhere. So you can see I've got this gnarly, nasty growth here that has just browned and shriveled up. Again, this plant is in a self-watering container. If I hadn't had it in that, I probably would have lost this plant, to be quite honest with you. But it survived, and I have some lovely new green fronds here. So the next time that I take this to the kitchen sink and give it a good once over, I'll clip away all this dead growth, and that'll show off my little friend here. I'm a really big fan of this plant stand. I found this vintage camel during COVID when I had to traipse out to the suburbs in my mask to hunt it down and purchase it from one of my collector friends on Instagram. So I'm really excited about it. I think it brings a lot of fun into an otherwise sort of formal space. So you may have already noticed that on my desk here, I do have a typewriter, and maybe you think that it's just for show or it's impractical, but I do have a separate library workroom where I have my computer. I do work on a computer. I'm not a complete Luddite. I just happen to really love writing handwritten notes and hand-typed notes. One of my favorite things to do is to send a thank you note. And I just love doing that anytime I go to somebody's gathering or somebody sends me a gift or pays me a compliment. I really use that as an opportunity or an excuse to pull out a stamp and a pad of paper or a note card. And when I found this typewriter, so there's a fun little story about this. So I was out at my local resale shop, and I tend to go to my resale shops probably once a month at least, just to keep an eye out for fun vintage finds like this little guy behind me, or like this typewriter, for example. So I found this typewriter lying on its side, almost like it was in a trash heap, just completely forgotten about. It's an Olivetti Latera 33. It's sort of, if you're a typing person, you kind of know Olivettis are sort of a mid-century typewriter. They were very common. It's a workhorse of a typewriter, has beautiful fonts on it. That's your thing. And I just found this guy lying on its side, and I had been looking at them online and not wanting to pay those prices. And my heart completely sank because I wanted one of these for so long. I'd been looking for them for 3 years. And then I found one, and here it was, just so uncared for and unloved. And so I picked it up expecting that, you know, some keys were gonna be missing or pieces were gonna be snapped or broken off. And I played with it for about 45 minutes and inspected every component inside on the floor of this resale shop, and not one piece was broken. So for $10, I picked up this guy, brought it home, learned how to clean it. Thank you, YouTube, for teaching me how to clean typewriters and get them to work. And I was able to give it pride of place on my living room desk, where writing is an occasional treat for me when I'm writing a note. It's just, I'm surrounded by my plants, and it's a lovely space to be reflective and thankful and full of gratitude. So one other reason I tell you that story is because I also love to collect vintage pottery for plants. And so whenever I can, you may notice throughout my home, I have plant stands and pots and pieces of furniture or collectible art that most likely I found at a vintage shop or an antique store. These are such wonderful places to find gems that I think can really complement the beautiful tropical vibes of an indoor garden. So if my vibe is your vibe, definitely hunt for your next treasure in a resale shop or an antique shop, and you never know what you're gonna find. Even I didn't plan this stuff. I found them, I fell in love with them, and I brought it in. And now I have not just the plants I love, but all sorts of other belongings. So, all right, back to the plants. Let's show you around. So in this little nook, right, because I do have a sunny south-facing window to my left here, but it is a relatively small window, and I've got it covered with plants that I'll talk about in a second. But in this nook over here, I have decided to put some medium light tolerant plants. I've got my fern over here, which is the most low light tolerant, and it's the furthest from the window, and it's the least reached by the grow light that is above it. So I do have a grow light in this little corner, and it does give me, it makes sure that I have enough light to fill and feed this lovely Anthurium pedatoradiatum. That's a mouthful. You can just say Anthurium fingers. Now, if you've seen one of these in your local plant shop, or if you go to my plant shop on pistilsandpollen.com and you look for a Anthurium pedatoradiatum, it's not gonna look like this, because in the juvenile form of this plant, the leaves are more simple. They're more like a traditional houseplant with just one leaf, right? As it grows and as it matures, it's going to develop these radiated fingers. So this is a solidly mature leaf here. You could see some of the older leaves down here where I have some of these spent flowers. You have far fewer fingers on it down here. So as it grows and matures, you develop these lovely fingers. And I just think this is such a beautiful wispy plant. Now, even though I have a grow light, a pretty strong grow light above it, you can see it's leaning, it's reaching towards the south-facing window over here. So this plant probably would prefer to be a little bit closer to the window, but you know, I've had it here for a couple of years now, and I think it's gonna stay here for a little bit longer. Now behind it, I have my bird of paradise. Now this guy is getting a little bit big, and to be quite honest with you, I have neglected it a little bit. You can see up here, the leaves have not fully unfurled. This one is doing it too. They should open up and split like they would in nature. This one is well split, but this one and that one, you know, it's been a little dry. It's January, February. We're in February now here in Chicago, and my humidifier is not really keeping up. And so this plant probably could use a little bit of care, but I don't know. I've just left it alone, and it seems happy regardless. So we're just gonna enjoy it as it is. I've got another plant back here, if you can see. This is a ficus plant, but not like your typical fiddle leaf fig. This is Ficus umbellata. So it has these like umbrella shaped leaves that I just love. And I find this particular ficus to be a lot less fussy than the fiddle leaf fig. And I also sell these on my houseplant shop, and I'm super excited to see how this one has grown. Now this one is not on a plant stand, so you could see it's already about 4 or 5 feet tall. It's reaching 5 feet. And hopefully one day these leaves are just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger as this plant grows and climbs. We did have some stress a while back that did hamper its growth, so I lost a lot of the leaves below it. But I think we're back on track. It doesn't really require a whole lot of light. In fact, this grow light is all the light it really gets. The sun from the window doesn't really reach over. And so it seems really happy with just this grow light. So if I only had natural lighting, I'd probably put this in an east facing or in a north facing window where that light is just really gentle and doesn't overly stress it. So I've got two little plant nooks here that I want to talk about that are bifurcated by this little cabinet. And folks always ask me where I got this cabinet. You know, I found this in one of my antique shops, and I just really love it because it is in perfect shape. And this is also where I store my little collection of whiskeys. I like to focus on some sort of unusual brands of whiskey, but one of them being a couple of Chicago brands and then a Michigan brand I'm a big fan. So we make some really great whiskeys, distilled beverages and spirits here in the Midwest. So I give those a nice special place in my cabinet. It's a fun spot to decorate plants around, and I can sort of create this sort of pyramidal shape with my plants and my art. This is a piece by Harry Schulberg. It's sort of another fun piece that I picked up in a resale shop, and I just really love the colors, and I love how it creates this shape with the plants on either side of it. So let's talk about those plants. I mentioned earlier that I'm a big fan of Sansevieria, and I've got this lovely Sansevieria next to this sunny south-facing window also supplemented with a grow light above it. One of the things I love about this particular variety, and I'm not going to remember the name just right now, but it's got these milky leaves. So this one leaf that looks like it doesn't belong in here, this is the newest leaf, and hopefully we'll see if it can reach higher than the most recent leaf, which is the tallest and also very dark green right now that it almost blends into the wall. So I love it when these leaves come out because they're this lovely milky color, but it's kind of fun that they do darken as they grow and age. And then also I've got my other sun-loving desert style cacti succulent plants in the window. This is another variety of Sansevieria. It's a unique variety. Actually, I don't remember the name, but I can see that I've got a tag in here. So I think it's Lancifolia. Let's see if I'm right. This is Sansevieria stuckyi is the name of this particular variety. It's not the pot that I purchased it in, but it's the pot that I transferred it to when I purchased it, when I only had these 3 little spears. And you can see it is definitely overdue for transplanting because it's just, this pot is so misshapen. So all of this new growth has been under my care. And in fact, if I put this in a larger pot, maybe I'll do that this spring, I suspect that I could probably get the next few spears being at least 6 or 7 inches taller than these. So I just think it's a really cool variety of Sansevieria, and I'm going to stick it right back in place. We've got one more plant back here that I should mention. It's my African milk plant. Now, you probably have seen these in your local big box store or local greenhouse. It's not an unusual plant, but it is unusual to see them quite this large. Now, I've probably had this plant for a solid 10 years, maybe 12 years, and I have not moved it since I placed it in this spot. Every once in a while, I'll get back there, I'll dust, but you know, it's in a really tiny pot. I give it a little bit of water maybe every other week. During the winter time, maybe once a month, and that's it. It just loves being in front of this sunny south-facing window. It loves being left alone, and it just does its thing and it sits there. So that's how I care for that plant, nice and easy. If we come down a little bit, you can see that I've got this Philodendron giganteum here. Now this one has kind of a cool story. It's a cut, I can show you. This green growth on this plant is an offshoot after I cut the mother. So this was the mother plant. I made this cut right here, and I chopped that and I propagated that, and I had that growing in another room in my house. And then I thought, you know what, let's see what happens. So I just left this one alone, and it put out all this new growth. And so now I have a second Philodendron giganteum. I'm a little bit nervous about it. If anybody wants it, message me, because this, as the name implies, is a plant that gets massive. I found these growing in Puerto Rico a couple years ago with leaves the size of my torso. This plant will get huge. So I've got another huge plant, and I've got enough already, so I'm probably gonna have to give this one away. And then to round out this collection, I have another little fern here. Again, I did forget about this one, but it's a smaller plant in a self-watering container. It didn't dry out quite as badly as the others over the holidays. So you can see I've got some brown edges that I'll go ahead and clip away, but otherwise it's a pretty healthy plant. Going to the other side of this sort of triangle here that I have flanking my south-facing windows, now we're starting to see where we get this little corner. Even though it's not directly in front of the south-facing window, it does, especially during the winter months, get a lot of that west-facing sun. So I've got another typical Sansevieria snake plant here. I also have one of my favorite snake plants of all time, this lovely whale fin or shark fin, whale fin, shark fin. I don't know if they're actually different plants. This one was sold to me as a whale fin snake plant, and I just love, I mean, look at this. It looks like a whale's fin. And these two are the most recent growth. This one's a little bit more narrow, but it's got these lovely striations and it's nice and tall. It's kind of wonky and funky, and I just sort of love how big and bold this thing is, and it just does its own thing. It's got a real personality to it as far as plants go, and as far as I'm concerned. This guy, let's see, did I label this? I don't have a label on this one, and I can't remember the name of it right now because this is one of those plants that, it's a Euphorbia, and I'm not going to remember the rest of that scientific name, but it is a euphorb, and it just, I don't do anything for it. You can see I've got it in a 1-gallon pot. I do need to transplant it, if only to put it in a sturdier, heavier pot, because you can see this plant is getting quite tall and I'm a little bit worried about it falling over. But for right now, I'm gonna leave it until maybe later this summer and then we'll transplant it together. So before we leave this little area, very close to my south-facing window right here, I have, I don't know if you can guess it, maybe you already have by now, this is another Alocasia plant. And you can see that it's just massive. It's not on a pedestal. It's in a pot on the floor of my apartment. I'm about 6 feet tall, so you know it towers over me and it almost reaches the ceiling. At night, this plant tends to sort of wrap, it doesn't quite dramatically like close up, but in the daytime it does sort of fold out, and in the evening it does fold up. And so in the evening when I go to bed, this plant will sort of fold up and it will almost reach the ceiling. And then in the daytime, it sort of unwraps and sort of reaches toward this sunny south-facing window. And you can see that I've got this lovely brand new frond coming in. Now, during the winter time, I often find that with my Alocasia, I only usually can keep 3 really good healthy leaves on this plant at a time. So we've got this new frond coming in, which means this leaf is probably gonna start. It's already on its way out. You can see it's leaning a little bit more. We've got some more sort of brown, crispy edges on it, a little bit yellowing there. So, you know, it's winter, it's stressed, and winter in Chicago extends through our spring. So it's gonna be a little while before the humidity and the heat and the daylight and day length returns that are able to keep this plant healthy and happy so that it's putting out multiple leaves, more than 3 at a time, that don't have brown, crispy, or yellowing edges. So for now, I'm considering this plant a happy and healthy success. And then right next to it is one of my favorite plants, the Matophyllum bipinnatophytum. Got it on the first try. The number of times I've had to say that one in front of a mirror to myself just to get it right. The Matophyllum bipinnatophytum. Almost messed it up that time. Otherwise known as a Philodendron hope. I sell these little guys in my plant shop as well. It's one of my favorite plants. I probably had this fella for going on 10 years as well. And one of the things that I love, now I've got such a bushy plant because I have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 little, maybe actually 5 now, a new one has grown in here. I think I started with 3 little plantlets in there, and I think we're up to like 5 now. And so it's really big and bushy. Now, you might see others who have just one of these little guys in a pot and the fronds get really long. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a varietal thing or if it's because I have so many in one pot, but I've got this in probably a 3-gallon size pot and I water it. It's very root bound, but my goodness, if I give this guy a larger pot, I'm worried that it's just gonna get so massive that I won't be able to keep it in my home anymore. So for now, I'm gonna keep it in this pot, in this location where it gets this nice, sunny, south-facing window light and a little bit of supplemental, well, I'd say it gets a little supplemental overhead, but honestly, this Alocasia is hogging it all. So it's actually just being lit by the window here. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so we're still near my large, sunny, south-facing window, and I have decided over here to do a collection of succulents. So I've got my beautiful, beloved jade plant. I've had this guy for probably about 12 years now. You can see that I've got 3 main branches. I like to give it a good pruning about once a year just to keep it from getting overly lean. A lot of these branches will grow down and just sort of not really look really great. And so I prune it back to give it more of this tree shape. And I think it's very happy in front of this, oops, in front of this south-facing window. So I don't know if you noticed what just happened, but if I shake it too much, one of these little leaves fell off. And actually, if you have one of these plants, they're really easy to propagate. So this leaf that just fell off because I touched it a little too aggressively, you could take this, put it in a little bit of soil, just the little bottom part of it right here, and probably, you know, after a couple weeks, you might have some little rootlets in there. So actually, I have to pick these up when they fall inside the pot because they end up rooting in the pot. But for now, I'm just gonna stick it in there so it's not on my floor. I've got another snake plant down here, and this one is kind of fun. This is a starfish snake plant for obvious reasons. And now it's starting to look a little less like a starfish. I don't know if maybe you can see this center one right here. It radiates out kind of like a starfish. Now this one has since sent off a little pup here and another little pup here. That's what we call little baby Sansevieria, little baby snake plants. So this pot now is starting to get a little small for this guy, but I have this growing in one of those little collectible pots that I have. And you can see that there's a little bit of roots growing out. It's definitely a root-bound plant. So this is a plant, again, I'm gonna have a busy spring transplanting, but it's gonna be fun because we're gonna do it together on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. And I can't wait to do those projects with you. I've got another one right here. Let's see, do I have the name on this guy? This is testing me. This is also root-bound, but you know what? I think it's okay to have root-bound succulents because they're so prone to overwatering that when they're root-bound, it's less likely. Madagascar palm is the common name, but I don't remember the scientific name. I'll have to write that one in the comments. But you can see it loves the sun. There's some winter stress on here as well, but otherwise a pretty happy and healthy plant. Watch out for these little spikes. They're very dangerous. All right, so that's it. That's my living room. I've shown you all of the plants in my living room. I've tried to give you a little bit of background about how and why I've sourced these plants and why I've decided to put them in their location that they're resting in right now for the winter. A lot of these plants will go out onto my balcony for the summer season, and then they'll grow, they'll get bigger, they'll change, and some will die. I'll lose some. And when that happens, in the fall, when it's time to move them all back inside again for the winter season, things aren't gonna fit where they fit this year. So every spring, every fall, I'm guaranteed to have a different layout. So perhaps you'll have to come, if you like this tour, and come back to my channel, like, subscribe, and make sure you see the fall update next year. Thanks for hanging, bye.